All right, everyone. So I'm very excited today to have Dr. Peter Stapleton with me. Welcome.
Thank you, Gavin.
Um, so I only heard about you relatively recently from a mutual friend, Carrie Keza, as she loves to be known,
Yeah.
refuses to be called Carrie. And I'm just so impressed by what you've done, which has really helped push this fourth wave of psychotherapy and psychology forward, specifically energy psychology. So can you just, I'm probably going to butcher it, so I'll just, in your own words, can you tell me what exactly the fourth wave of energy psychology is and why that's been, yeah, firstly, what it is, I think is a good place to
Yeah,
start.
yeah, good place. Really, energy psychology is an umbrella term. So that term itself has been around for decades, but
Mm,
really encompasses, I would probably say most simply, any techniques that kind of include the body as part of therapy. So we might kind of say somatic based or body based kind of approaches. And we might sort of look at that, including things like EMDR, that's now evidence based gold standard, eye movements,
mm,
things like that. But other things in that energy psychology kind of, bucket, if you like, could be things like any kind of somatic processing or trauma based therapies, could be even trauma informed yoga. It may be things
mm,
like tapping, obviously that's my research area, anything that
mm.
uses acupoints, but other techniques such as Reiki, anything with the biofield, they would all come under that pot, if you like, or that umbrella. My research particularly has been just in the acupoint therapies,
Mm.
mostly emotional freedom techniques, EFT, just because it's nice and easy, it's manualized, and it's been quite receptive to obviously clinical trials and rolling them out, and easy for people to replicate as well. So we can definitively see what happens when we tap on an acupuncture point. So under that umbrella of energy psychology, EFT is the most researched at any academic level worldwide. So it's probably kind of the poster child for energy
Mm.
psychology. That's not to say that there isn't research for lots of those other modalities. And that fourth wave really, if we just quickly kind of, people might be listening going, what are the first three waves?
Yeah,
That's why first question. Yeah, yeah. So
sure.
the first wave in therapy really is the psychodynamic, psychoanalytic. So people might think of Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, people like that. Absolutely, lots of that still gets used in lots of work, but that really was there for hundreds of years. The 1970s saw the behavior therapy movement, and that was very much driven by obviously lots of experiments in the lab, B.F. Skinner, Pavlov, Ivan Pavlov, all those kind of big sort of, key figures that were doing behavioral psychology. And we
Mm.
still use a lot of that today, basic parenting techniques, obviously people trying to change behaviors, things like that may use some of those principles. But the 1970s saw people like Dr. Aaron Beck, Judith Beck, his daughter, kind of come into that second wave and go, I think we're really not paying enough attention in humans to the cognitive element or the thinking element. And that,
Mm.
of course, was cognitive behavioral therapy. And we
Mm.
have lots of extensions of that. So, acceptance and commitment therapy, mindfulness therapy, they're all in that third wave with CBT because they
Mm.
still very much come back to what are you telling yourself in your
Mm.
mind? But EMDR really started the fourth wave shift, which was, I think there's something missing still in that triangle if we look at thoughts, feelings, behaviors.
Mm.
And maybe that is that element of the body that's having, a lot of people are aware of their body's reaction before they are aware of a thought. So the fourth wave in the EMDR, EFT, and that's some other sort of, body based therapies. Really, the last 2 decades, lots of research has emerged to support that there's another viable option out there that it sort of extends the cognitive therapies and is quite, sort of what people are looking for sometimes when they've tried lots of those other therapies, but just haven't quite got the behavior change that they're after. That was a very long answer, Gavin. Sorry.
It's a great answer. It's a great answer. I feel like I had a tour de force of
Yes,
the
that's the history of
Western,
therapy. Yeah,
yeah, history of therapy. Really
yeah.
good, really good. Okay, wonderful. And I watched your excellent webinar on the Bond University page as well. I thought that was fantastic, and I recommend people go check it out. And you referred to the fourth wave as cognitive somatic, and I'm very interested about integration and integrative therapies generally, because obviously, I guess when you take it to its logical conclusion, it's like the mind is in the body, so it sort of does make sense that they would be, would be related. Um, so is is that a good way for people to understand what fourth wave is? Because obviously, as you said, it's kind of a big term right now. It's potentially yoga. It's potentially acupressure points. Like, is it just a mind body integration thing fundamentally? What's going on there?
Yeah, it's probably, for the first time, because lots of people are used to talk-based therapies where we go and see someone, we talk it out, we learn different ways to think or view our problems, perspectives, meaning making. But fourth wave approaches will acknowledge what's happening in the body and even target it at that body level in order to get that shift at the cognitive. So absolutely something like EFT tapping will use the thinking part. So what are you telling yourself? That kind of thing. But the intervention is done at the body level on body sensations a lot of the time, because the body calms down, and that's that link to the mind, like you're saying. If the amygdala, that stress center, is calm, often the client will have a different thought process, or they will have that moment of clarity. They'll be able to get that perspective without us having to ask them to reframe how they're thinking. So yes, we're absolutely acknowledging what are you telling yourself, but at the same time, let's do the intervention at the body level and calm the body down. And then the other stuff really happens much more easily and more naturally, which I like to say, we don't have to worry about the willpower aspect, and we don't have to worry about homework, because a lot of fourth wave therapy approaches are done in session. They don't rely on, okay, so now what I need you to do this week is to go home and keep a journal, and I need you to do this. And we don't have to do any of that, because we're actually doing the intervention in that 60-minute session. And then we're like, okay, go and have your week, and I'll see you next week, and we'll see, how it went, what changed, what didn't change, that kind of thing.
I'm also curious, like from a research perspective, it's very challenging to get something proven to be having a causal effect. What was that like to actually get this validated scientifically, and what sort of challenges or did you experience there? Because I think that's a really significant part of this.
Yes, and sometimes I sit in the corner and wonder if I'm mad that I actually took this on. And look, it probably really wasn't driven by, oh, well, we need to go out and prove this. What was happening, and this was 20 years ago now, so I've been doing this long.
Overnight success.
Yeah, it takes 20 years. And really, how's it been? Long. That's really the answer, long. But it was because practitioners, colleagues, and I, we were working in our private practices and obviously academia as well. But we were just looking for things that would help our clients. We didn't have restrictions that we do in our current world, particularly here in Australia, around what's allowed to be done under a Medicare session and things like that. So there was actually a little bit more freedom. So we genuinely were kind of going, my area was eating disorders, trying to find techniques that would help my, clients with anorexia recover with their, anxiousness, or bulimic clients with intense kind of urges to binge. So it was in that process that we sort of, in the internet, stumble across some of these techniques. And if anything, most of us were kind of like, let's give this a go. And I think Australians are a little bit like that. So we're like, lo and behold, it started to work. Or our clients were coming back and saying, yeah, I don't have that worry anymore. A colleague of mine was working with PTSD and phobias, and she was saying the same, but I was saying the same about my clients with eating disorders. And they're like, oh, no, I'm not worried about that anymore. Or actually, no, my binges or my self-harm behavior is, kind of dropped off. And we're like, we haven't done anything different except tap on these acupuncture points. That led to, we should really find out what's going on here. And of course, my academic role allowed that. But again, we still didn't know. So we were curious. And that's probably the best place to come to research, is to kind of go, I wonder what's happening here. And obviously, we started the first research trials. Were we ever worried? We probably were never worried enough about what people thought. Whereas,
amazing.
Yeah, and that probably was helpful, that we were kind of like, people keep turning up to these clinical trials. Let's just keep going. And obviously we were able to get more sophisticated in our research designs.
Mm,
Where are we at now? So we're 20 years down the track. So we do have 10, like 20 sort of years, not just here in Australia, but worldwide, of
mm,
academic research where lots of pockets of different people have tested, particularly EFT tapping for different
mm,
conditions, which has created momentum. And we have absolutely had, like at a community groundswell level, lots of acceptance and embracement. So lots of organizations have embraced it. It's taught, even at university level worldwide and things like that.
mm,
Where it's sitting, though, as far as that evidence-based kind of tick, is really coming up in the fourth wave,
mm,
and obviously making sure that due diligence has been done from a research point of view, so that particularly academics and people like that feel certain that, yes, it's a safe technique. Yes, it's equivalent, to other gold standards out there. And that's been the journey of the last 20 years in research, is really to kind of show not necessarily that it's superior, although it does, like EMDR, EFT does achieve the same outcomes as our gold standard therapies, but
mm,
in a much faster time frame. But to show that it's a viable option. So
mm,
what you asked, what are the difficulties? And yes, this is what we face. Look, there is a translational gap in
mm,
research to practice and acceptance, and it is about 20 years. So we are sitting at that 20-year mark. It
mm.
also, it's a change paradigm. So
Yes.
it is very much about, it's okay to let things go, or for other things to have a place. It's not that CBT doesn't have a place. It's not that
Mm,
and commitment doesn't have a place. Everything has a place, but it's okay to allow other modalities, if you like. That
mm,
that has been the challenge, and the challenge has been with the status quo,
mm,
the gatekeepers, if you like, who
mm,
have perhaps had their reputations built upon a third wave approach, and absolutely nothing wrong with that. That was where it was historically in time,
mm.
but to also be open enough, and that is my line. If I'm ever signing a book, it's like, just stay open. There's always other possibilities, and
Mm.
this one has evidence. So that's where we're at. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's a really great story. And as I was telling you via email, one of the things I want to do is also celebrate Australians and really promote tall. I would call Growing Tall Poppies is the book I want to do, and just highlighting amazing Australians who are doing great work from home. And that's so nice to hear you say that we have a sort of an attitude here of like, but screw it, let's do it, let's give it a shot, and for that to come from that genuine place of really caring for your clients and wanting to find the best thing for them, and having that curiosity. I think that's fantastic. So I just want to celebrate you there and acknowledge
Thank
that.
you. Thank you, Gavin.
Because did you experience a bit of tall poppy culture around sort of, really trying to put something forward when you talk about status quo? Obviously, you've got a very positive attitude, but just to sort of speak to some of the potential challenges that other people might be facing now.
Yeah, totally. Not so much. I've had colleagues
Hmm.
experience that overseas, and it's
Mm,
been a very different climate.
mm,
The one thing, and I do share this with practitioners, so we do obviously offer supervision and training and mentoring to other practitioners that want to learn how to use these modalities.
mm,
And sometimes they do worry about what will people think, because, quite
mm,
frankly, tapping on your face while you kind of work through your trauma might seem a bit strange to
mm,
what we're used to.
mm,
So the one thing that I did do 20 years ago was,
mm,
if I was worried about trying to share, hey, we've got these outcomes, or the media might ring up and want to do a story, or I'm trying to pitch it to, get funding or something like that, was if I had worry, or if I was concerned about what will people think, or
mm.
will I get a brick wall, I actually just did my tapping technique. So
Bravo.
yeah.
Bravo.
So it's the one thing, I'm like, I literally have the technique that I can use to help this. And hand on heart, I can look back at
Yeah.
the last 20 years and sort of say, look, majority, and even my university now, are incredibly supportive. But I think that's because
Mm.
I don't worry. They accept it and they embrace it, and we're allowed to teach it here at master's level because everyone just accepts it. I'm not worried. I'm not the one that's standing here going, oh, what will people think? Because I cleared that a long time ago with tapping.
That's so incredible. I absolutely love that you just held that frame so strongly with your own modality that everyone just sort of came into your frequency.
You got to do what you got to do.
That's just great. I love that. I love that. Um, Yeah, that's such a great answer to that question. How did you overcome it? Well, same thing that I'm teaching everyone else. So
Yep.
love it, walking the talk. Um, okay, cool. And so one of the things you mentioned also was biofields. I'm really fascinated by that, and obviously the emergence of, I guess, the various tools to be able to measure fields. Is that something that you've done? I think Kerry mentioned that you did some fMRIs with people before and after to measure fields. Like, can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I think a lot of yeah, energetically sensitive people, if you will, who may be tuned into this, would find that quite vindicating to realize that some of these things can actually start to be measured now.
Yeah, there is a whole theory and yeah, bank of research around biofields. And I have a PhD student at the moment who is investigating Reiki, so hands-on
Mm,
healing. And there's actually a lot of research. So the theory around there is a biofield. HeartMath Institute talks about
mm,
the electromagnetic kind of field of the heart is about 6 feet. And we teach that to our students that are obviously becoming psychologists because
fantastic.
we sit closer than that when we're in a session with a client. And
Wow.
we have them, they experience, they may have a client that comes in under supervision that has major depression. And when they walk away from that session, they come to us and say, now we know what you mean, because that's quite a heavy energy to be working and helping someone with depression as symptomology. So
Mm,
we can't avoid, even if people can't get their mind around it, because you can measure that biofield. HeartMath has some wonderful tools. People can have a Google online to
mm,
look at that. What we've done with particularly EFT and meditation as well, so I do research with Dr. Joe Dispenza quite a bit as
mm,
well, was
mm.
we do functional MRI. So we do have a look at before and after treatment programs of either EFT or meditation, what's happening in the brain, blood flow, EEG we've measured. We've done vagal tone measurement with Stephen Porges. So we're looking at the body systems. We're like, okay, for a long time people thought, and still there is a belief out there that this acupuncture system in the body is energetic, and
Mm,
they obviously call it the meridian system. But the last sort of 10 years has really shown, in particularly Korean research, it's actually
mm,
vascular. So the primovascular
mm.
system, you can inject dye into this acupuncture system in the body and see your acupuncture points. You can see.
Wow.
So if we're tapping on them, we now know, hey, this is not just a feel good energetic thing. And we can see this. We can see changes.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So the last 10 years has been really exciting. Cortisol studies, blood pressure, heart rate variability. We're doing all of that because it helps people kind of go, okay, so if I am tapping on a pressure point, keeping my mind focused on what's happening, my amygdala, my stress center is getting calmer. Guess what? My cortisol goes down, my EEGs normalize, my functional MRI blood flow to my brain about my chronic pain is now normalized, those kind of things. And that's really quite convincing research to show people before and after. Uh, and
Yeah.
and not even that, long-term follow-up. So we've had 2-year follow-up on one of our food craving trials, and nobody could remember the food that they'd done their tapping on in the 8-week
Wow.
program 2 years earlier. Of course, we reminded them,
Mm,
and they just laughed because they're like, I don't remember the last time I ate that food, because there's no desire, there's no willpower, there's no, kind of, I've got to, stay away from that to stay safe. It's just left. So memory reconsolidation really kind of explains to us that once the problem's gone, the problem's gone, but we can actually see it in your brain now. So there's some really cool technology that we now have at our fingertips, and we're gearing up for quite a big mechanism study in the next couple of years of EFT, just to really pull it apart to see
mm.
what's happening. So yeah.
That's so exciting. That's so exciting. And yeah, you did mention, just to do another Australia plug here while I've got my patriotic hat
Sure.
on, that was one the second university in the world, you said,
Yeah,
to
we were
provision?
to start teaching EFT. So the first was in Paris. So we love the French.
No,
And
there you
that
go.
was,
Ooh la la.
yeah, a colleague in the EFT world who
Oh, fantastic.
was instrumental in having it accepted at their level. And then we started teaching it 2 years ago here at Bond University, just based on the fact that our externships and placements for our clinical master's students in psychology allow them to use tapping. We have schools, we have government organisations, we have health departments that absolutely allow it. So we're teaching them properly so that they're not just watching a YouTube video before they go
Mm,
out, and then they're able to use those tools.
mm, that's incredible. And is EFT did you say the person who maybe I read somewhere the person who made EFT open sourced it? Is that what they did? Is it?
Yeah, so EFT in its current form, so the one that we do study, the founder there is Gary Craig. So he was an engineer.
Hmm.
I'm married to an engineer, so I
Oh,
slip that in and go, these engineers must just go out there looking for things. So Gary Craig had learnt other versions of different tapping techniques, and there are
hmm,
versions that exist before the birth of EFT.
hmm,
But coming out of that, he simplified and obviously came up with the formula that we use today. And
hmm,
when he retired from kind of, sharing EFT to the world and was really just trying to let people use it for their own, if you like, released the copyright to the world so that everyone could benefit from it and obviously have structure around teaching it and things like that. But there's still certainly the versions of tapping and other kind of modalities are still used today as well, just in different settings, and have had research done on them as well.
hmm. That's amazing. That's a good gift to humanity as well for someone to do that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned and yeah, for what it's worth, I think I probably will do a EFT certification at some point next year. One of the ones I think I saw off your website or something you recommend. I think it's probably good to invest in that skill. Um, and you mentioned also that Joe Dispenza, you used to be working with him. Can you tell us a little bit about that research and what's going on there?
Yeah, sure. So I actually met Joe in, now I'm going to get this right, 2017.
Hmm.
So he had come out here to Australia to an event that we were hosting. And I'd followed his work for a long time and, on a whim, emailed his secretary and said, do you think he'd come and speak at this conference? And of course, we didn't hear anything. So, you do the classic energy psychology of, we'll just let it go. Uh, anyway, 3 days before Christmas, she emails and says, yeah, he said he'll come out. Anyway, we were a bit like, oh, wow. Okay. All right. So, anyway, fast forward, he's here 6 months later,
Oh,
and
cool.
him and I are chatting. Must have been on the last day of the event. He'd already done his bit, so had I. So we're kind of getting to know each other. And he told me that he had all these EEG scans, which they'd been collecting from their meditation workshops for about 5 years. And I said, well, you should publish these, not just in a book, but, academically, those kind of publications
Hmm.
really add to credibility. Anyway, we barely know each other. And he says to me, do you know anyone who can help? And I'm like, yeah, we'll be able to help. So I'm like, dog myself in, I'll find someone. So that was the first study that we have published since, and we did look at those 5,000 EEG scans and
Wow.
published all of that. So novice meditators, which was
Hmm.
fabulous. And from then, we have gone on to run a couple of other studies together, including most recently a primary school meditation trial here in Australia, and we're replicating that in Mexico right now. So, yeah,
Wow.
Joe's got a real passion too, obviously, with helping children self regulate and
Hmm.
schools. So, yeah, we've had amazing outcomes, and we've also finished a school leader trial and things like that as well, using some of his techniques. So, yes, I only spoke to him a few days ago, but yeah, just kind of adding that research element. He works a lot with heart math, and they do a lot of research data collection there as well. But yeah, we're talking about sort of things to do in the future, and he is the sole reason that I ended up writing the science behind tapping with my
Hmm.
house. So I said to him, if I have to write the book, you have to write the foreword. So he agreed.
I bought that book actually. Yeah, I thought I'd talk to you first. I've started reading it, but yeah, just getting straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Um, okay, there's so many amazing threads to go down here. I'm like, oh, where do we go? I mean, I'm curious because I've got two young daughters, one very young, one 3 months old, one 3 years old, and emotional regulation is a big deal. And I can imagine in school, and you have to start sort of conforming, it's going to be even bigger deal. So, can you tell me a little bit about what the research trial you ran at the primary schools was, and what the sort of outcomes there were?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a 10-week meditation trials, and it was term 4. So any
Hmm.
parent listening out there knows term 4, particularly in Queensland, it's a bit hairy because we're starting to get really hot weather and everyone's hanging out for the end of the year for Christmas time. But it was a daily meditation trial. So it was only 5 minutes. So for the little ones, we did have the two groups in primary school. So up to age 8, and then obviously 9 to 12-year-olds in the upper end. but from prep, so the prep to 8. So it was only about a 5 minute every day, and it was a Dr. Joe meditation. So he particularly recorded these for the age groups, and they had the same meditation for 2 weeks, and then they would get a new one. So they learned everything from obviously what we might call some breathing techniques, the meditation style, but then they moved into being able to imagine a pleasant scene, that kind of meditation, as well as, a favorite animal. So they got 5 different meditations, and we were able to sort of see, and every Friday, the students actually filled out the questionnaires for us on their iPads. So we were getting weekly outcomes from them, and they were allowed to write whatever they wanted. So we had some amazing kind of outcomes, not only in the measures. So we were looking at emotional regulation, behavioral difficulty, self-esteem, all of those things responded, as in where they started in the beginning to 10 weeks later, absolutely had improved significantly at a statistical level. But we had feedback from the school that they normally report behavioural incidences. So if you get sent to the school principal's office, and they have the data for the last 3 years, and it's cross-term. And you can definitely see patterns across terms of how many kids get sent to the school principal's office. And in that term of the 10 weeks of meditation, compared to the previous years, there was such an absence of behavioural reporting that all of the teachers attributed it to the fact that they were doing the meditations every day in class. And they were journaling about it, they were writing, they were drawing pictures, they were teaching each other. We had a story of one young little boy who was sort of dysregulated on a daily basis. I do believe there was some diagnosis there, and he looked like he was about to kind of, have a tantrum one day, and the teacher heard the classmate sitting next to him remind him to be the pond. Now, Joe had talked about these meditations about being in the pond and the calmness of the water. And so that one phrase was the connector, but the little, classmate had said, just remember to be the pond. Joe said, be the pond. And this student was able to remember that, drew a picture of the frog on the pond, and we got a lovely copy of that as well. And it was just those moments of that sharing that really told us these kids really benefited from that trial. So yeah, so that's fully published now, so that is available. Anyone can go off and read, and certainly see all those pictures are included in the journals of what they wrote and things like that. And based on that, we ran another trial with 3 more schools the following year, but we did use, in the second trial, this one's coming out early next year, we had 2,500 primary school students in Queensland, but we used the Smiling Minds app. So again, we were just testing a different modality, which most of the schools have access to. And we had one school that did tapping instead. So they had videos of me. So they watched a video of me instead of the meditation every day for 10 weeks. And funnily enough, we actually, the outcomes show that EFT achieved the same outcomes as the Smiling Minds meditation app. So for some children, tapping may actually be a bit easier, particularly if they're a bit fidgety or a bit young, or even if there's, diagnosis such as ADHD and things like that, because you can do it on yourself. So we did find many of them like to tap before they meditate, because they can get themselves just a little bit more centered. And then, so 2 papers will come out of that trial early next year, the 2,500 meditation trial students, and then the subgroup that we did EFT versus the meditation. So yeah, it's very exciting.
That's extremely exciting. Yeah. Wow. Congratulations. And thank you for doing that. As an Australian parent.
Some of these things, and my girl, I have 2 daughters as well, but they're now 17 and 21. So they have had tapping in their lives, and they obviously know Joe Dispenza, and they flit in and out of different techniques and things like that. And, they've known tapping their whole lives. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. They've always seen me tap. Obviously, Dad taps as well. He's the engineer, but he'll tap with me. So it's been a very normal technique for them. And so it's much easier than if, I don't know, something is happening. And I tapped on them when they were little babies as well, for just tapping on an acupuncture point helps someone regulate and kind of come back into themselves anyway, even if there's kind of more tapping to be done. But it's just been such a normal thing for them. They're like, yeah, that's what we do. That's what we
Mm,
do. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So let's put it if I wouldn't if you wouldn't mind to put your futurist hat on for a hot minute. You seem like someone who just very much lives in the present and just sort of stays very grounded in the present and then ironically manages to do a lot of stuff that has an impact on the future. Is that a fair assessment of you or
Yeah, I definitely don't live in the past. So
mm,
yeah, so absolutely, the past is, we can reflect and we can learn and things like that, but I'm definitely not back there.
mm,
I'm very forward thinking, so it
mm,
is, and obviously goal setting organization is a fairly easy skill for me. But at the same time, probably my biggest thing that I've ever learned is to say no. so
mm,
so sometimes there's, and I always say this too, because I supervise a lot of PhD students, they have a lot of
mm,
threads they want to go down, and I'm like, this is what we do, and this is what I do. There's an
mm,
ideas book. So there's always a
mm,
physical book, and every idea goes in the book, but they may not all be action now. So, 10 years ago, we may have wanted to do the mechanism study of EFT, but the timing wasn't right. And I do have a mantra that everything is perfect timing. So
mm.
if it doesn't happen, it's not perfect timing yet. So everything goes in the ideas books because there's a lot of ideas, but not everything gets actioned. And yeah, sometimes we just got to stay here and now and priorities and things like that. So, and every now and again, and it's happening next year, I have a year where I just do not action any clinical trial research. So I may consolidate for a year or write papers, but don't actually start any new. And that is next year for me, 2025. And I'm putting that out there. The more I put it out there, the more people ask me to run a trial. Yes,
Well,
that's my.
so that's amazing. Well, I mean, you're obviously extremely effective as a human being, so it's a good opportunity to just sort of even chunk it down from even less than what specifically you've achieved, but your process generally. So tell me a little bit about that then. Like, what is this consolidation phase? What does that mean for you, and how can people sort of implement that in their own lives?
Yeah, so for me in the research world, it's very much about, obviously we might come, and this year we've spent the whole year replicating a trial from about 15 years ago, which was about using EFT for improving vision. So
Mm,
looking at the psychological emotions that affect people's vision and clarity. So the whole year has been about running those trials. So next year for me will be very much about writing up data analysis and things like that of that trial, because it has long-term follow-up, but also the school trials and things like that as well. But also having the time and space to really be able to not be reactionary, but to really think and plan for
mm,
perhaps the years that follow, about where do we want to go with this, or where do we want to share it, where might the impact be. So sometimes you need the time and space, and I always find that it is when I have kind of holiday time or annual leave where there's nothing that's needed to be done, there's no kind of got to tick the to-do list, but that's when we might start to kind of have different ideas, start to ponder, let things percolate, things like that. But it's where I might seek inspiration, by listening. So I do like podcasts. So I
mm,
am an auditory learner, so drive around, but I'll listen outside the psychology world, my
mm,
world. So I'll listen to different podcasts, and that's sometimes where I'll think, wow, yeah, you know, that disruption that happened in that
mm,
industry may have a place here. But we're
mm,
always looking to support our practitioners in our community, because we are absolutely dedicated to their, skill and training, and to be offering the best possible client service. So we're always supporting them. So that's part of my process, is how we can best support them moving forward in everything that we do as well, because they're the ones that first embraced EFT. Like they're
mm,
the ones that really took it and kind of got the outcomes with their clients, and yeah, gave us the opportunity to kind of do the research. So yeah, but we
mm.
all authors, we all say we're never writing another book. Like, and then of course somewhere you write another book. So I'm like, nah.
Funny, I've done a couple of book launches, and I've always say I'm never doing another book launch because they'll take it out of you too. Um, Beautiful. All right. Well, so you said some very exciting things in that Bond lecture around, that in the next few years you anticipated potentially Medicare would jump on board with this, and and even the schools thing. Do you see this as something that, from a policy perspective, is going to be rolled out across across the schools in some capacity? And how do you think that'll all play out?
Yeah, we have had that already happening in Australia, probably over the last 5 to 6 years. So we have had whole schools that have obviously invested the professional development budget in training every teacher in EFT. So
Mm,
that has happened quite a bit across Australia. Or there's been a pioneer teacher who has been absolutely allowed and supported to learn EFT and use it on a daily basis in the classroom, or teach small groups, as the guidance counselor or whatever. So that has happened not only here in Australia, but worldwide. And there's quite a movement in that classroom space. Different countries have different requirements about what's allowed, but
mm,
absolutely that is something. And it is the first place that Kerry and I kind of got to know each other, because we were running research in schools that she was
mm,
part of with EFT for students.
mm,
So absolutely, I think that's there. It's funny, the last couple of years we've seen it really come into health departments here in Australia, and they're now maybe not necessarily for patients, but they're absolutely advocating EFT for self-care for
mm.
staff. Now, that has been amazing to see, because for a frontline worker in hospital settings, emergency services, to have that regulation tool to be able to either discharge at the end of the day or work with something that's just happened to you is absolutely needed. So psychological first aid, we call it tapping first aid. We're
Mm.
absolutely been rolling out, particularly to frontline workers, and I'm a director of a charity that offers that at very low cost to organisations to learn. So that's sort of been happening. Obviously, worldwide, we see a lot of this being mirrored with organisations just accepting the evidence base that's there and saying, yeah, we approve it. And that has been happening more and more. So most recently, literally only 2 weeks ago, my national body, so the Australian Psychological Society, gave me the most distinguished research contribution to research award for the year, which
Amazing.
20 years ago I wouldn't have said they would come near at all. But
That's incredible.
it
Yeah.
was quite the surprise to kind of go, okay, so that's now the national body in Australia saying the research that has been done is absolutely, it's not about statistical significance for us. It's about people's lives are changed. It's
Mm.
about the client sends me the email 6 months later and says, I don't have chronic pain anymore. And I forgot I was in your trial. And I'm like, that's why we do this.
Mm.
You know, it was such a, yeah, the impact from the client level is why we keep going. So, yeah, I
Well,
can't say,
first of all,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, congratulations on that. I mean, that is to see, because I've worked in this sector for a while. The mental health sector is very conservative and very what's the word I'm looking for? Slow moving in many ways. So
Yeah,
for good reasons, and to see, yeah, APS, Australian Psychological Society, and your name and EFT and tapping in the same. I almost had to double take. It's like, am I am I seeing this, or is this an AI
people
generated
may
name?
have
And I was like,
double checked as well.
yeah, no, but not that it was you, but I mean, just that these two worlds are now coming together. It's absolutely fantastic, an incredible achievement. So thank you and congratulations for that. It must be very vindicating. And yeah, and yeah, I just want to take a moment to celebrate that. I think that's absolutely fantastic, because I think something you mentioned earlier on around the paradigm shift, and it's not just about statistical significance. I think those are really fascinating. Um, that is a very significant paradigm shift, because if I've worked with a lot of clinicians, and really one of the challenges is how do you measure subjective well-being in a purely quantitative sort of means? It can be in some cases reductive to the point where it's challenging to really fully encapsulate the subjective well-being of the person in question. And it's like, as you say, with that school trial as well, you can put out your gold standard measures, but of course then there's a measure that the school's using around behavioral incidences, which isn't part of a classical gold standard measure, and that's actually the most significant thing for the actual people involved. So is that something you're seeing as well? And tell me a little bit about that, because that seems to be a shift at the level of the epistemology of and the way of knowing of how the research is even conducted, which I feel is just as exciting as the EFT itself.
Yeah, you're right. It is often what we would call clinical significance, that it's yes, we can measure it in certain ways, even physiologically, like the actual intervention, but the impact on the people's lives, and we see that in the follow-up emails, because we, send out, please fill out my survey. I need to know how your
Mm,
life is, that kind of thing. But the quality of life outcomes, or in our chronic pain, we've done chronic pain research for a while now, people that go back to work, but had been on work cover for, 20 years, that kind of thing. But it wasn't a forced, it was just this natural evolving. And that's the thing that's really struck me about some of these fourth wave therapy approaches, because the change happens so deeply and at an unconscious level, it's so subtle that the person doesn't even think about it anymore. And they're literally a different version of themselves, but their life reflects that. And that's what it was, obviously, in the school trial, that the school noticed in their data, because they have to report that, and went, hang on a minute, we haven't had all these behavioural difficulties or reporting of incidences. That's the same, term that we ran that trial, because the kids were regulated. They weren't poking each other. They weren't yelling in class because they had these tools. And you're right, that's the clinical outcomes that often get overlooked when, we publish a dry academic paper with statistics in it, because I think they go hand in hand. Yes, but the sample size is big enough that we can see it statistically, but hang on a minute, here's the lived experience. And that is incredibly valuable. And more qualitative research does unpack that to sort of say, well, yeah, how do you think it went? Or is it tolerable? Or can we take these techniques and use them in different cultural kind of settings? Do they lend themselves? Are they transferable? Or are these really only things that can be done in certain client groups? And that's what's exciting, I guess, about research, that allows us to sort of, be quite kind of open and to all of those aspects, that it's not just about a lab or, and really the APA in America, the American Psychological Association, are calling for field research more and more, not academic clinical. So can this be delivered by someone, in a traumatized community where a natural disaster has happened? And the answer is yes. Those studies have
spoiler alert. Yep.
So amazing, and can it be peer-to-peer, and that's even better. So yeah, you're right. There's so many elements to research that people kind of forget or overlook, or suddenly judge that then means, oh, well, it's not as good as something else. And it's like, you've got to compare apples to apples here. And really, what does the client think? And that's what we come back to all the time. The client,
yes.
And whether that's the child, the teenager, or the adult, it's the impact on their life.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. That's, as you said, it's where you started, just with curiosity in terms of how can I help the person in front of me, and letting the research methodologies expand to include that human, that really human element of that. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. I'm conscious that we could probably talk like 3 hours about all of this, and I know that you have things back to back. So first of all, if people do want to learn EFT for themselves or for others, where and even support what you're doing, because I feel just a strong urge to really support what you're doing. I think it's absolutely fantastic, world-changing stuff in a very grounded and practical way. So I'm all about it. What do you recommend? Where should people go to learn more about this and even become EFT certified if that's what they want to do?
Yeah, sure. So myself, Peta Stapleton, on all the socials, we share everything on that, including all our research outcomes. PetaStapleton.com, that's just my main website. The EFT training you can find from there, but we run in Australia evidence-based-EFT.com. So it just is our particular, but look, there's reputable organisations worldwide, and most trainings do offer online delivery. They are live, not recorded, so you are still learning live. The pandemic helped everybody kind of pivot to that. So, but there are reputable organisations worldwide. If anyone was somewhere over in the world, and just reach out and we can connect you to someone. We just happen to support the Aussies here, and hopefully New Zealand in the near future as well. So so it's just really about, learning to be able to use these techniques in that therapeutic setting in a safe and competent way. And I would encourage, even if someone, is listening in and just wants to learn EFT for yourself, for personal use, that is such a fabulous place to begin. Even if working with clients is not something that's in your wheelhouse, nothing wrong with that. But to learn this technique is so valuable. I mean, anyone sees me driving around, side of the hand can be done on the wheel, steering wheel in the car.
Please, and road rage. That would be amazing. Yes.
Exactly right. And Gary Craig, obviously the founder of EFT, had this vision that if we just all sort of, worked on our own kind of, things that triggered us and our own life story and things we wished were different. The ripple effect of that would be so profound because the person we then interact with that we don't have that reaction to anymore, and then the ripple effect from that. And he terms that, the personal peace procedure, that if we just came back to finding our own personal peace and just self-applied something like tapping, the ripple effect would be quite profound. And so it is something that we encourage everybody to explore. And you can absolutely Google the personal peace procedure online and you'll find that everywhere. But just stay open, everyone, learn it for yourself and just see where it goes.
Amazing. Beautiful note to end it on. Personal peace procedure and just ripping that out to the world. Thank you so much for your time.
No, my pleasure.
Um, Appreciate it.